In this lesson, we're going to go over some games basics and then work through a sample game step by step. At the Princeton Review, we call the analytical reasoning portion of the LSAT the game section because the best way to approach it is as if you are actually playing a game. A majority of the LSAT students start out feeling confused and frustrated by the game section, but I have some good news for you. If you develop a clear, consistent, systematic approach to attacking the games, you can improve significantly in this section and maybe even find it kind of fun. What's important is that you realize that you are in control of the game section. As you may have noticed during your first practice test, each game section has 4 games comprising 5 to 7 questions per game, for a total of 22 to 24 scored questions. Do you have to do the games in the order in which they're provided to you? No, definitely not. Ranking the games in the order of personal difficulty for you is a primary game strategy. Do the games in the order that works best for you. In general, there will tend to be 2 easier and 2 harder games per section, but you need to make your own assessment. Do you even need to attempt all 4 games? Not necessarily. It makes more sense to do 2 or 3 games accurately and fill in your letter of the day for the questions you don't attempt than it does to try 3 or 4 games and make tons of mistakes. How many games you ultimately attempt will depend on how many games you can do accurately. Only a small percentage of LSAT test takers should attempt all 4 games. Doing 2 or 3 games well can definitely help to generate a law school-worthy score. You're going to learn how to approach any kind of game that you might see on the LSAT. Once you know how to tackle the basic games variations consistently, then you're going to be ready to work on speeding up your pacing. So, let's get started. Every game begins with a setup, a paragraph of information that lets you know the basic game scenario and the elements of the game. After reading the setup, ask yourself what the game board should look like. Is this setup asking you to put things in order, to put things in groups? In this game, there are 6 groups in a parade, marching as units ordered from first at the front to 6th at the back. So this game is asking you to put things in order. Whenever a game does that, whatever comes in a natural order, like Monday through Friday or January through June, or whatever elements are given to you in order, that's going to be the core of your diagram. That means that the ordering is going to go across the top of your chart. Leave some space on the left for the rest of the game's instructions and draw a diagram on the page that looks something like this. Your game pieces, or elements, are the 6 groups. Write down an inventory of the elements to the left of your diagram, symbolizing them with the single letters F, G, J, M, P, and V. As part of the inventory, think about how the elements will relate to the slots in the diagram. Since each group marches once and only once as a unit, there is a 1-to-1 ratio between the elements and the slots. Each space gets 1 element, and each element is assigned to 1 slot. Below the game setup at the top of the page are the rules of the game. We call these the clues. Always number your clues to keep them organized. Below your inventory, number and symbolize the clue like this. Look at clue 1. At least 2 groups march behind the puppeteers, but ahead of the musicians. This means that you have to leave at least 2 slots open for other groups to the right of the puppeteers before you can place the musicians. This is a combination of a block clue and a range clue. The dash is like a rubber band. It can contract, putting the musicians in the 3rd space after the puppeteers, or it can expand, pushing them farther away to the right. Clue number 2 says, exactly 1 group marches behind the firefighters, but ahead of the veterans. Notice the similarity between the first clue and this second clue. This clue gives you another block, but without a range attached to it. So symbolize it in a similar way with exactly 1 empty slot between the firefighters, who are on the left, and the veterans, who are on the right. How about clue number 3? The gymnasts are the 1st, 3rd, or 5th group. This one's simple. Just write down the 3 options for the gymnasts and pop it in your diagram. Once you've symbolized your clues, you should always carefully double-check them. This is really important because if you mess up a clue, you're going to mess up the game. And if you don't realize until the end that you've messed up a clue, you're not going to immediately know which questions were affected. So check your clues before you proceed with the rest of the game. Check the clues by looking first at what you symbolized and then back at the text so that you'll have a better chance of catching any mistakes you might have made rather than just repeating them. Look first at what you wrote for clue number 1. There are at least 2 slots to the right of the puppeteers before the musicians. Now look up at the original clue. Does it match? Check. Look at what you wrote for clue number 2. F and V are in a block with F to the left and exactly 1 slot in between. Now look at the original clue. Does it match? Check. Look at clue number 3 the way you symbolized it. G is 1, 3, or 5. Does that match the original clue? Check. Okay, now that you've double-checked your clues, you can proceed with the next important step, which is making deductions. Aside from knowing how to symbolize the basic elements of a game and what the question types are, making deductions is perhaps the biggest thing that you can do in games to improve your score. So, what do we mean by making deductions? You want to uncover additional restrictions that you can write down and use as you answer the questions. There may be elements that can never go in certain slots in the diagram, or an element that always has to be in a certain place. You may also be able to combine certain clues with each other to learn something new. Deducing these things up front can help you to have a better understanding of the game, save you time as you answer the questions, and improve your accuracy. Look at clue number 1. There are always at least 2 other units between P and M, with P to the left. That means that P can never march 4th, 5th, or 6th, because if it did, there wouldn't be room for 2 other groups and then M to the right of P. And for similar reasons, M can never march 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. Mark this in your diagram. Now look at clue number 2. You'll have similar deductions since this is another block clue. You need at least 2 slots to the right of F for some other group and then for V. So F can never march 5th or 6th, and V can never march 1st or 2nd. Mark this in your diagram as well. Finally, the third clue tells you that G is always 1st, 3rd, or 5th. So G can never go 2nd, 4th, or 6th. If any of the elements showed up in more than one clue, you might be able to combine those clues with each other, but none of these elements appear more than once. You know that the blocks in clues 1 and 2 will have to fit around each other somehow, but there's nothing more that you can deduce about that up front. Finally, look for any unrestricted elements. You know nothing about J at this point, so the jugglers can go anywhere until you have additional information from the questions. Well, okay, now that you've symbolized the game and thought about the restrictions, you can go on to the questions. There are different kinds of questions in games, and you're going to want to do them in a certain order, not necessarily the order given to you. The first type of question you'll do is a grab-a-rule question, if there is one. If there is a grab-a-rule question for a given game, it's generally the first question after the setup. A grab-a-rule question asks you to pick an answer choice that represents a complete and accurate ordering of elements where all of the rules of the game are followed appropriately. Let's take a look at question number 1. Which one of the following could be an accurate list of the groups in the civic parade in order from first to last? It's a grab-a-rule. You can tell because it's asking about accurately matching up elements with slots in the diagram. The answer choices also give you a hint since each answer choice shows a complete lineup of elements and slots. To work this type of question, go to the clues you symbolized and grab the first rule. That one said there were at least 2 groups in between P and M with P to the left of M. Now, go through each choice, eliminating any that break this rule. Choice A is out, since there's only one group, the veterans, between the puppeteers and the musicians. Once you have found one thing wrong with an answer choice, cross it off and don't look at it again. Choice B, it's out as well, since again, there's only one group, in this case the jugglers, between P and M. Choice C is okay so far, so move on to choice D. Choice D is okay so far too, so on to choice E. And choice E is out, since it breaks our first rule by putting the musicians before the puppeteers, not after. So you got rid of 3 answer choices just by grabbing that first rule. Now, grab the second rule. There's exactly one group between the firefighters and the veterans, with the firefighters on the left. Go back to choice C. Does it follow this rule? No, it puts the veterans before the firefighters. So that's it. Choice D is our correct answer. After doing a grab-a-rule question, the next type of question to look for is a specific question. Specific questions grant new information about a specific version of the game and usually start with the word if. Doing the specific questions first will give you possible arrangements of elements that will help you answer the other questions later on. Take a look at question 2. If the gymnasts march immediately ahead of the veterans, then which of the following could be the fourth group? This is a specific question, so you're going to do this one next. It asks, what could be fourth? Circle the word could, and also start a new line in your chart. Next, symbolize the new information you got from this question stem next to where you'll be working through this question in the diagram. You have a new block with G immediately to the left of V. Once you have written down the new information, see what new deductions might emerge. First, look back at your clues to see if you can add anything else to this new block. Clue 2 tells you that the veterans are 2 slots to the right of the firefighters, so now you can add the firefighters onto your new GV block. Clue 3 tells you that G can only be 1, 3, or 5. Well, because it now has to have the firefighters immediately to its left, G is down to either 3 or 5. That only gives you 2 places to put the FGV block, so go ahead and place it in the chart, first with G and 3, and then on a new line with G and 5, and fill in any further information about each instance. In the first scenario, Rule 1 limits P to only the first space. M and J will fill in spaces 5 and 6. Our deductions tell us the second version won't work since there is no space for M in 1, 2, or 3. The question asks which unit could be fourth, and according to our diagram, the answer is V. There is no other way to do it. This gives you choice E, veterans, as the correct answer. Next, take a look at question 3. Is it specific? Yes, so that is the next question to attack. It says, if the veterans march immediately behind the puppeteers, then which of the following could be the second group? Just like in question 2, the first things to do are to circle could be the second in the question, start a new line in the diagram, and symbolize the new information. So, the veterans are immediately to the right of the puppeteers. And just like with question 2, now you can add on the firefighters, and that creates an FPV block. But there's even more. P shows up in clue 1, so now you can add the range with M on as well. Because of the M range, there are only 2 places to put the FPV block, in slots 1 through 3, or in slots 2 through 4. We can then fill in the remaining players G and J according to Rule 3. The question asked what group could be second. There are now only 2 possible answers, P or F. Because only the firefighters appear in the answer choices, that gives you choice A as the correct answer. Question 4 is another specific question, so that's the one to do next. If the jugglers are the 5th group, then which of the following must be true? Circle must be true in the question, start a new line in the diagram, plug J into slot 5, and keep it there throughout your work for this question. The original clues told you nothing about the jugglers. However, the 5th group should ring a bell. Clue 3 limited the gymnasts to slots 1, 3, or 5. With the jugglers occupying slot 5 now, the gymnasts are down to 1 or 3. The next step then is to see what happens if G is in 1 and if G is in 3. If G is in slot 1, there's only one way to fit clues 1 and 2 around each other. The only thing that works is to assign F to slot 2 and P to slot 3, and everything else falls into place from there. And if you start a new line and move G to slot 3, there's again only one way to fit in clues 1 and 2. P has to go in slot 1, and F stays in slot 2, leaving V still in 4 and M still in 6. So, since this question asks what must be true, you're looking for something that's true in both possible arrangements. P could be third, which eliminates choice A, since it could also be false. F has to be second, which eliminates choice B, since it must be false. V must be fourth, so choice C is out because it must be false. Choice D could be false, since G could go first, and it's out too. Choice E, however, must be true. In both of the 2 possible arrangements, M brings up the rear in 6th, which gives you E as the correct answer. On to the last question. Which of the following groups cannot march immediately behind the gymnasts? This is your one general question for this game. General questions usually start with the word which, and they don't give you any new information to add to the original rules. However, you can often use your previous work to help you, since you've generated a variety of possible arrangements through working the other questions. That's why we do specific questions before general questions. Circle the word cannot in the question sem. So, you're looking for the group that can never be immediately to the right of the gymnasts. But looking back in the diagram at the work for question 4, you can see that there was no problem putting the gymnasts in 1 and the firefighters in 2. So choice A is gone. The jugglers haven't been assigned to the immediate right of the gymnast yet, so keep B in for now. But choice C is definitely out, since in question 3, the gymnasts could march 5th with the musicians assigned to the 6th slot. Choice D has to be left in for now, since the puppeteers have never yet been assigned right after the gymnasts. But choice E, it's out, based on the work for question 4. The gymnasts could go 3rd with the veterans 4th. So you can eliminate 3 choices just based on previous work. The next step is to start testing the remaining choices, B and D. Now is the time to take advantage of the fact that G is fairly constrained. It can only march 1st, 3rd, or 5th. So let's test choice B and see if you can put the gymnast 1st and the jugglers 2nd. That doesn't work, because if you keep at least 2 spaces between P and M, there's no room left for the FV block. Maybe it'll work with the gymnast 3rd and the jugglers 4th. Not so much, for the same kind of reason. There's nowhere to put the FV block. And if you try to put the gymnast 5th and the jugglers 6th, you have the exact same problem again. If you put P in 1 and M in 4, which is the only way to fit in those 2 groups, there's nowhere to put the FV block. Therefore, the jugglers can never march immediately behind the gymnasts. B is the correct answer, and there's no need to even test choice D. Congratulations! You've now completed your first game, the Princeton Review Way.